I just want to check, what does it look like if I turn this on? Oh god, I've disappeared. Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of these tier list videos. My name is RabbidLuigi. In the last tier list video, I don't even remember what we did because it was a very long time ago. It might have been Silent Hill, it might have been October. I've been wanting to do another one of these, but I've been working out what I want to do going forward with these because they were getting a little difficult to make, a little bit long to record, a little bit long to edit, and frankly, I want something easier for the middle of my week where I'm also making a video at the weekend. So we have a slightly different type of video, but ultimately, I'm still sitting in here talking about something in a tier list and deciding what I think about, how I think about. Today we have Nintendo consoles because I thought, hey, we could do a franchise, and we probably will be doing franchises going forward. But it might be fun to just take a week and decide how I feel about Nintendo's colourful history of consoles, because it hasn't always been brilliant, it hasn't always been good. You know, there's a lot of high quality consoles in Nintendo's history, but also some notable low points, and deciding how I feel about all of these is going to be kind of fun to see, you know, because I don't really know at the moment. If you're unfamiliar with how we do things here, what I typically do is pick my favourite console, and then put that in the tier list, usually at S, because that's generally how favourites work, but then it kind of gives us a point of reference for everything that comes afterwards, and I don't really know what my favourite console is. I grew up with the GameCube, I had the N64, but I was a bit too young to... I think generally, where I am at the moment, the Switch... That's weird. Poor dear, I'm not so sure what happened to my audio just then. I don't know, but apparently it's fixed now. I have a readout in Audacity that shows me how my audio did. It spiked a lot. I don't know what it sounds like, but I'm going to find out later. So I don't think it's my favourite console, but it is what I'm really enjoying right now. I'm going to have to put the Switch in S, because you have to remember that the way Nintendo makes consoles, they don't always look for the highest output of power, the highest quality of games from a technical standpoint, because frankly, I don't know if they could do that if they really tried, but I think they have tried that in the past and it hasn't always gone well for them. And this way, if they make a different kind of console, they're not stuck in some kind of ridiculous arms race with Microsoft and Sony, which is where the Switch is like the perfect console for them. It's not a technical powerhouse, it's nothing that's going to give you the highest quality of 4K resolution at 120 frames per second. We don't need that. We are Nintendo. We make entertaining games that don't need to be technically impressive. They can be technically impressive for the console it's on, but we would much rather play games that make us feel something. Breath of the Wild is not the most technically impressive game. It chugs sometimes in handheld, but it's still, like, creatively one of the best games ever made. I will put my opinion out there that honestly there are few games that have come close to what Breath of the Wild is able to do. So it's a very important console for many reasons. The fact that it's a handheld console as well kind of gives it the edge over a lot of different things on this tier list, and really just in the history of video game consoles, because it's always been difficult to get a type of console that can marry the appeal of handheld with the power of a console. And it's not that powerful, but it is more powerful than, say, the 3DS, and it gives it the edge in so many different areas. And I can't wait to see what they do with the Switch going forward, how many years it lasts, if they get some kind of Switch Pro out of it. Apparently it might be coming out this year, but honestly I'm just happy with the Switch, because after what we had before, it needed to be good, and it was really good. So I want to say this right now, because we're at the N64 era of Nintendo. It's going to be hard to judge these consoles as consoles, and I think it's going to be impossible to judge these consoles as just consoles, because you got to remember that with the N64 especially, there are video games that were on that system that kind of make the console better. I don't think the N64 is all that good a console. The controller is weird. The way it functions, like, it was a cartridge-based console at a time when a lot of different manufacturers were moving towards disc consoles. Like, compare it to the PlayStation 1 and there is no contest in the PlayStation's favor. But you have to also remember, this is Nintendo transitioning to 3D. And admittedly, they could have done that on any console. I'm sure if they, in some weird reality where they didn't piss off Sony, they would have made something for the PlayStation or the Nintendo PlayStation and got a similar kind of mastery of 3D graphics and environments so early on. But the reality is that it came out on the N64, it made the console better, because all of a sudden, if you were to, you know, sell this to someone, you've got Mario, Zelda, fucking Mario Party, Mario Kart. Mario did a lot of stuff on the N64, but everything clicked so well on the N64 for Nintendo, but I think a lot of it was the games. My issue is how the hell do I rank that? Because N64 is a wonderful console for games. Most of these are fairly good consoles for games. It's just, as a console, I don't think it's that great. B is calling out to me. And even then I feel like it should be an A, just because some of the best games of all time can be found on the N64, but I'm going to leave it there, and if I decide that it should go higher, we'll do some kind of overview later, and, you know, make that decision then. It probably won't be a difficult decision where the Game Boy goes, because frankly, it's one of... I don't think it's the first handheld. I think there may have been manufacturers who attempted to do something with handheld gaming before the Game Boy, but it is comfortably one of the most influential consoles of all time, not even close. When you think about it, the Game Boy doesn't have that many high-quality video games on it, and of course it's got stuff like Tetris, and you can't deny that what the games were at the time on the Game Boy was a big deal, but not many of them have really stayed the test of time, have risen above what the console was, and have stood out, and you think, oh wow, that was for the Game Boy, that's kind of cool. Really, the Game Boy is an icon of handheld gaming and showed the world, and really the entire video game industry, how good it could be to take video games on the go in a way that kept going for a very long time. And you could argue, like, right up until the DS is when the Game Boy's influence, where it stretched to, because it was still a Game Boy style console. Game Boy Advance was still under that name and designed to be a similar kind of thing. It's just the Nintendo Game Boy was ground zero for a ridiculous revolution of handheld gaming. And, you know, when I look down the list of some of the best games that came out on the Game Boy, it's good stuff. Pokemon was on the Game Boy, that's pretty good. Ultimately, the console is bigger than any of the games on it, and on it, you can't say that about many of the consoles in this video. And for that, it's basically an automatic S. Because if we didn't have the Game Boy, Nintendo would look a lot different to how it does now, especially considering that the Switch is like a big, chunky, powerful Game Boy. Speaking of big and chunky, here's the Game Boy Advance, which is where I came in on the Game Boy ride of wonderment, because I wasn't really born at a time where I thought, hey, the Game Boy Color looks interesting, but the Game Boy Advance was a bit more of a step forward in technology. The games started to look a little bit more interesting. I believe it was no. How many bits was the Game Boy Advance? I don't even know. I don't even care. Doesn't matter. We're beyond the point of caring about bits these days. I want to say 64, but it might have been 32. It wasn't 16-bit. It might have been 32, but I'm too scared to look because I might sound stupid. I've checked Wikipedia. It's a 32-bit console. You just gotta believe me, because it's on a tab. It's there. The Game Boy Advance was effectively... It's not very interesting as a console to talk about. It didn't do anything revolutionary. It's changed the shape of itself, I suppose, to be more like a controller with a screen, which is, again, kind of the precursor to the Switch, really. But it's just made itself more powerful and more comfortable, which, again, is a little tricky to judge in comparison to the Game Boy. It's not as influential, it's not as revolutionary, but it is more impressive as a console. Maybe not so much as the time it came out, because you got to remember, the Game Boy, I think, was 1989, Game Boy Advance 2000, and early 2000s, because I'm not going to get that exactly. But it did what it had to do. It's not as impressive to think back on, I suppose, because the Game Boy shattered ground. It did new things. The Game Boy Advance just did those existing things a little bit better. So I'm gonna put it in the A, because that sounds weird. Don't put it in the A, don't do that. But I'm gonna put it in A because some of the games on it, pretty damn good. They effectively, I hit my microphone, that hurt my thumb, ow! Some of the games on the Game Boy Advance took advantage of the fact that it's a more powerful console and gave us some of the best handheld gaming you're ever gonna have in your entire life. So for that reason, kind of a good console. Nice job, Nintendo. The Nintendo 3DS was 2011. It's a good test of my knowledge to guess when these consoles came out. Nintendo DS, 3DS even, 2011, because I remember being quite excited for this game, because it felt like handheld gaming was always a distance below console gaming. It was good, some of the games are actually incredible, but graphically and technically, you had, like, the Wii and the DS around the same time. The Wii is capable of stuff that the DS just can't really match. Both got gimmicky control schemes, but you have to buy a DS game with lower expectations than you would with a Wii game. And that was the same with the 3DS for the most part, but it came out at a time when they wanted to remake Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and thought, hey, how about we put it on the 3DS as a showcase of how incredible this console will be. And I remember getting this console with Ocarina of Time 3DS, or I think it's just called 3D, and it just melting my brain in a way that kind of doesn't happen very often these days, because it was handheld Ocarina of Time. You don't do that unless you are a seriously beefy piece of crap, and the Nintendo 3DS is not as impressive, not as grand a console. It's a handheld, it's a console, it doesn't matter, it's a handheld console. It's not as impressive for what it did new. The gimmick of 3D was kind of pointless because I barely used it. I spent like 95% of my time playing video games on the 3DS with the slider turned off because it just hurt my head sometimes and I didn't want to have it on all the time. But actual technical stuff that the 3DS was putting out, it had some brilliant games on it. Stuff like the gyroscope. You do Star Fox 64 3D with the gyroscope, or Majora's Mask with the remake, which is mostly terrible, but you do the actual gyroscopic controls of those games, and it is a transcendent experience. Those are the definitive ways of experiencing those controls. I can't say Majora's Mask 3D is definitively the best way, because it's not. There's a lot about the 3DS that just changed the game in a big way, and that, I was going to put it in B, because I didn't think it was that impressive, but I forgot that it had, like, the gyroscopic controls, and, like, it refined what was already there from the DS. Didn't make anything too crazy. Like, the 3D is not important, but the fact that it can comfortably run three-dimensional video games kind of changed a bit, because, you know, the PSP could do that. Why the hell couldn't a Nintendo handheld do that? It's just catching up with it, with, like, impressive graphics and consoles. I just enjoyed it. I still play it now. It's like 9 years later, 10 years later. We're in 2021 now. And we're going so well. We were doing so well. We got two S consoles, two A consoles, and a B console that might even end up in the A console ranked thing. We have the Virtual Boy. Do we need to talk much about the Virtual Boy? Does anybody remember the Virtual Boy? I don't remember when this came out. I'm gonna guess like 94, maybe, as a decent guess, but the Virtual Boy is comfortably one of the lowest points in Nintendo's history, because they poured ideas into this. They poured their not even much their talent, but their creativity into this. It was the future of their involvement in the console market. They didn't pour money into it, but they definitely thought that this is a way that video games can go. And we've kind of seen it with VR. It's not quite VR. It's kind of like, do you want to shove your head into a console and have it project an image across your eyes? That sounds cool. Is it mostly just going to be red? Yeah, it's going to be mostly just red. It's not going to look good. It's not going to sound good. It might hurt your eyes and give you headaches. Nobody really took to this. The number of good games on the Virtual Boy, it's not good. It's not great at all. It's actually quite sad. So there's not much to say, because Nintendo have done quite a lot to distance themselves from the Virtual Boy in recent years, but it is a notable very low point in Nintendo's history when it comes to console manufacture. And that means it has to be at the bottom, because nothing else here is anywhere near as bad as the Virtual Boy. So, you know, it just feels weird to talk about it in any kind of light. It's just bad. Really, really bad. The Game Boy Color. How the hell do I rank the Game Boy Color? It is the Game Boy, but in color. I don't remember many games that were specifically made for the Game Boy Color. I might actually look that up. That's an interesting thing to look up. Actually, there's more than I remember, because they had a good time. Like Pokemon Crystal's here, Link's Awakening, when that was ported. Technically, Link's Awakening DX was the color dungeon. It was nice. You know, Resident Evil Gaiden's on here. That's not terrible. We had a decent time with the Game Boy Color. I don't think it's anywhere near as important as the Game Boy, but it actually shows a sign that Nintendo wants to have some kind of backwards compatibility with Game Boy games, because obviously the Game Boy was massive. They wanted some kind of way of improving on the Game Boy, and that's quite hard with limited technology, with limited technical prowess, without just completely redesigning it, which is kind of where the DS comes in. Kind of the Game Boy Advance had bits of that. My Discord is dancing away to itself. But effectively, the Game Boy Color was a color version of the Game Boy, with a few... That's actually like 100, like quite a number of 100, like 700, 900, quite a lot of games for that console. But it didn't really do much. I don't think it was more powerful. It could just run games in color. It couldn't upscale them into color. I don't think it could. I don't know. That's silly. But at a time when a lot of displays were black and white and really only as good as they needed to be, the Game Boy Color injected a little bit of vibrancy into our lives with, you know, handheld gaming that had a little bit of a pop to it. Didn't have a backlight yet, so of course, you know, you couldn't play them at night. I remember that. I never really had one, but my sister had one, and I, you know, tried to play it, and you couldn't play it at night. You had to have a lamp or something. It did its job. It's still pretty good. I don't really think I should put it any higher than A. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not as critical to Nintendo's success as the Game Boy. So I think this is fine. Like, the N64 is still, like, a weird console to think about, but this is fine. It can stay in A. The Nintendo DS is actually massive, is actually quite important, for reasons that kind of hint to where Nintendo would take their consoles, their handhelds, because this was the start of Nintendo screwing around with designs and control schemes, really, because touchscreens are everywhere nowadays. They are absolutely everywhere. Your phone has one. Maybe your laptop has one. Maybe it's some kind of tablet thing. But you have Nintendo here in, like, 2004, I'm gonna have a guess, maybe, because the Wii was the year after, roughly. 2004, saying, hey, you can control this game with gestures, with your finger, with a little stylus that comes with it. That's absolutely bananas. I love it. I played games on the DS that, at the time, just exploded my mind into a million pieces. Stuff like Nintendogs, which took advantage of the fact that the DS came with a microphone that picked up basic inputs and basic commands. Nintendogs is madness. For 2004, do you want to play a game where you can stroke the dog on the touchscreen? You can give it commands, you can tell it to sit on the touchscreen, and it will do that? That's crazy. How do you do that? How do you keep it going for so many years and morph it into the 3DS over time? And it's still just the most important thing. Not as important as the Game Boy, but Nintendo proved by stretching the game out to occupy 2 screens, you could actually really refine how a game is played. You can put the menu on the bottom screen and give it some interactivity without having to pause the game, to pause the action. It turned Pokemon into quite a snappy experience. You can just press a couple of buttons and fly through some battles. So it's a console or a handheld that really benefited the games that were released on it and showed that they could be a little bit more interesting, a bit more streamlined in that way. And not every game that was released on it made the best use of the technology available, but it gave it a damn good go. And I think, considering how influential it's been from its release date till now, because they're still making 3DSs, maybe not so much nowadays, but you can feel the influence of the DS all the way up to the Switch, and that means I have to put it in S. It's one of the, I think it might be the best-selling console as a group of consoles that Nintendo's ever made. So, yeah, it's going in S. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, as I live and breathe. Now, this is hard to rank. Very hard to rank. It's the sequel to the NES, one of the most important consoles of all time. I'm gonna put the NES in here. You can't stop me. You might think you'd be able to. You can't, because it's just there. It helped to bring the video game industry out of its darkest hour at a time when the industry was kind of floundering around for things to do with itself. The NES stood up and said, hey, I'm the Famicom, I'm amazing, buy my shit. And everybody did, and it kind of brought the video game industry back from the brink, so of course, kind of has to go there. The sequel is harder to rank, it's harder to judge, because riding off the back of a very important console, you got a lot of work to do. You got a lot of stuff to do to reinvent yourself, to show the world that you deserve to be considered in the same breath. In terms of video games, the SNES is kind of mind-blowing. It's kind of amazing, the number of amazing games on the SNES. I'm not going to say for even a half a moment that there aren't amazing games on this. I'm not even going to list them, because if I start listing, I'll miss some out. Because, oh man, it's a lot of good shit. So my issue is where the console lies in terms of competition, because the NES didn't have much, but it kind of blew everybody away. It showed what video games could be going forward from like 1983 onwards. By the time the SNES came out, I want to say like 89 or 90, maybe even 88, I'm not sure, but by the time the SNES came out, it had competition. And ultimately, over the course of a few years, it did lose out to Sega, because Sega came in with the Genesis and kind of was amazing. Various reasons why it was amazing. Sonic was really good, but also, technically, it was more impressive. And that means it's quite hard to decide how to feel about the SNES, because it's still amazing. Oh my god, the games are so good. But as a console, it lost ground on what had been built up by the NES. And as a technical marvel, it is good, but I don't think it's as impressive. It's a different kind of, it's a 16-bit console. The NES is 8-bit, I'm pretty sure. Didn't have any 16-bit games. I just, you know when you feel so confident about something, but you say it out loud and it sounds stupid? I don't know. The SNES is basically the 3DS to the DS. Important, valuable, had some amazing games, just not quite as important. And the fact that it lost ground to Sega kind of puts it a little bit lower than the NES, because damn, that thing was tasty. What we have remaining is a little pocket that I'm going to call my childhood. Technically, I was a child when the Wii U was here. That was like, you know, the Switch came out in 2017. The Wii U was like 2012, so I was like 17. Getting old. Oh dear. But this is like the pocket of Nintendo that I have the most experience of. Technically the Switch is up there because I play that nearly every day, but I used to spend actual hours of the day, many hours of the day, just vegging in front of these consoles. So I feel like I've got a good judgment of where to be with these consoles. Now, you need to remember that the Wii is a bit of a unique bastard, because Nintendo made the Wii after the GameCube, specifically with the intention of not trying to get caught in any kind of competitions of Sony and Microsoft. The way that game consoles were going, that next-gen hardware was designed to be better than the last, always trying to strive for betterment. It's always got to be shinier, high quality of teraflops and pixels. Nintendo, I think, made a really good decision to just stay away from that. We don't want to get involved because, frankly, maybe they could win, but maybe they should spend more time making very good video games, and less time actually trying to refine the graphics and making sure pixels upon pixels upon pixels are being shown off in the highest clarity on your TV, because that's not why I play video games. I do like a nice looking environment, but I would much rather play a fun video game. The Wii is a very gimmicky console. I have to mention that as well, because the control scheme is fun. I like waving around a controller. Some games became a little too reliant on them. They were built around a slightly imprecise, shaky mechanic, but it helped the console become more casual and easy to understand, which meant it sold like actual hotcakes, and it gave Nintendo a foothold in a video game industry that was moving in a direction that they didn't want to go in. So I have to give the Wii a lot of credit. A lot of the games that are on this are unusual. They're high quality. Stuff like Super Mario Galaxy is very high quality and a very good showcase of what Nintendo can do with a console without making it the entire focus of the game. Like, I talk shit about Skyward Sword a lot and I feel like it mostly deserves it, but that still used Wii Motion Plus pretty damn nicely. Wii Motion Plus was just like the more accurate version of the Wii, designed to actually show off your movements in some kind of one-to-one replication, and Skyward Sword kind of did that. It was a bit of a weird game, but it kind of did that. So the Wii had some amazing games on it that really did show off the technology quite nicely. Unlike the Wii U, and you knew we had to get here at some point. I'm glad it came kind of late and kind of separated from the Virtual Boy, because it's important to remember that the Virtual Boy was actual shit. Actual, unadulterated, uncompromised shit. The Wii U, on the other hand, was just very misguided. Very misguided from Nintendo from a lot of reasons. I do like certain things about it. The gamepad, it kind of makes me sad that the Switch doesn't work this way, because the gamepad was a cool idea, that you have the console, this giant fucking controller that you have to play with every game, but also it has a screen on it, and it makes games like Wind Waker HD really well optimized. Because if you play with the Pro Controller, you can pause the game and it actually pauses and you got to do stuff. Or on the Wii gamepad, you can just move shit over to the relevant button. And it is kind of underrated how much the Wii U changed things from a technological standpoint with Nintendo consoles. But the problem is, the game was marketed like actual shit. They did not do well. The commercials are terrible. The name is kind of terrible because people confused it with the Wii. They thought it was just an add-on to the Wii, and it's not. It's its own console. And the problem is that they just didn't know what to do with it. They released some good games on it, but the lack of like a high-quality Zelda game on it. I know they got Breath of the Wild, but that was the Switch as well as a launch title, but they didn't really know what to do with the console. There's a window there for a Metroid game, because it's got the scan feature. It was used in many different games. I think even something like Nintendo Land that had some kind of scan feature. We didn't get a Metroid game, and that was wrong. That was bad. So it's a checkered period of Nintendo's past. I don't think it's a bad console. We have a tier list for that. We have a whole tier for that. But it's just a bit misguided. I think it could have done a lot better, but it was too closely linked to the Wii, and it just wasn't the Wii. So it's gonna have to go there. And we're gonna finish off with the GameCube. Now, I actually adore the GameCube. It's a wonderful little piece of kit, because it just gave me so much love in my childhood. I enjoyed so many games on it. The number of good games on the GameCube actually makes me angry. Like, how can you do it? How can you have so many good games on one console? But it kind of gets let down by the technology, because the controller's good, the discs are weird, the discs are strange, but aesthetically it looks a little bit too much like a toy. And I know Nintendo did have that reputation for being a family-friendly company, but it meant that it was marketed like a toy, and it didn't do well for Nintendo for that very same reason. So it did move Nintendo forward technologically. Some of the games on it are damn impressive. Wind Waker still looks beautiful for a game that came out 18, 19 years ago now. But I don't feel like they really did all they could with the GameCube. It's a weird looking shape. I know like Xbox has ridiculously large, fat consoles, but the GameCube kind of just stood out as a weird-looking console at a time when Nintendo needed to convince people that, compared to the competition, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how they looked, because they all look kind of similar, but the GameCube stands out as this weird-looking box, and I don't know, it just took Nintendo in a direction that they kind of had to continue with the Wii. They had to go off in their own direction, because frankly, they didn't have much of a choice. I've already picked this up, so I'm going to stick it in B, because we now spell out F somehow, which is good, but I'd say roughly it's along the same line as the N64, which again had incredible video games, but like the console itself was a bit of a letdown, and Nintendo, I feel like, could have done more with it. The tiny discs of the GameCube are Nintendo moving in the right direction away from cartridges, but they're still a bit weird, and I, never really got over them. So that'll be doing like just fine like that. Anyway, that's my tier list. I hope you enjoyed it. Am I very wrong? Am I incredibly wrong about the state of the Wii U? Is it up here? Should it be? It shouldn't, but should it be up here? I don't think it should be, but tell me what you think. What's your favorite Nintendo console? I think generally the Switch is right up there for me. The Wii is also pretty good, but some of the control schemes are a bit annoying with the shakiness, but I'm pretty happy with how that's gone. I haven't got too many complaints of what stuff I'd move around. The N64, I'm actually okay with it being in B now, so that's pretty good. What would you like me to talk about next? Because I have many ideas or many franchises I can talk about. Should I get more into hardware or software or, shit like this? Because this is doable. I can do this as well. And hopefully I can get back to doing these weekly. I do enjoy doing them, but I just need them to be a slightly more streamlined process. And even then I've been recording for 30 plus minutes that hopefully I can condense down into a shorter video. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, which might be next week. Take care!